Hey everyone, this is lecture 5.1. Here we're talking about predatory violence, a topic that is really interesting and also deeply disturbing. So we're going to talk about defining violent crime, and then we're going to look at patterns in killing itself, because most of what we look at here is actually killing. That is not to say that rape is not also predatory violence in many cases, but it kind of has its own unit in and of itself. Content warnings here. We are absolutely talking about violent crime and murder. There will be some talk of sports injuries, which can be a little traumatizing, assault, and then also the murder of minorities specifically. So, because of the importance placed on human life in our society, a great deal of academic legal attention has been exerted in the study of killing. And then, of course, the way sociology works, this provides us with loads of definitions. To understand murder as it relates to criminal convictions, you have to understand a couple terms. First is malice aforethought, which is carrying out a plan to murder or commit crime. Second is premeditation, which is the planning of a crime ahead of time. So, malice aforethought is your plan to do the thing. Well, I'm sorry. I got that mixed up again. It's easy to mix this up. Malice aforethought is the actually doing the thing, and premeditation is the plan to do the thing, right? So you do premeditation first to think about killing somebody, and then you actually go to kill somebody. And we'll talk about each of those in greater detail in a bit. It should be noted that suicide does not classify as murder. Suicide classifies as its own thing. Consensuality is also a component of determining if something is murder or not. So consensuality is defined as all parties engaging in an activity willingly. So if somebody dies as playing in a game of football, it is far less likely to be considered murder than other situations, because it is assumed that the person going into the football game knows about the risks associated there, and there is a very slim possibility that you could be injured up to and including death. However, if somebody dies during a book club meeting, it is much more likely to be considered murder. The FBI definition of murder is the willing, non-negligent killing of one human by another human. That definition is pretty good, especially when you compare it to the historic definition of rape, which is really problematic. So generally we break this up into first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and manslaughter. First-degree murder is that with both premeditation and malice aforethought, right? So the person has thought about killing the person, they have a plan to kill the person, and then they actually follow that plan and kill the person. That's first-degree murder. Sometimes that's called premeditated murder. Second-degree murder, then, is a spontaneous murder. Sometimes this is called a crime of passion. The murderer does not have premeditation, but they do have malice aforethought. They want to kill that person. And then manslaughter, which is an illegal killing that lacks both premeditation and malice aforethought. So you've killed somebody, but you didn't plan to kill somebody, and you didn't mean to kill somebody. So for example, killing somebody with a car, vehicular manslaughter, is typically classified as malice aforethought. And you can even kill somebody with your car and not be convicted of manslaughter, but that's for you to talk to a lawyer about. I'm not an expert in that regard. Here are some additional definitions, additional legal definitions. Assault is unlawful use of physical violence against another person. So there are certain people in society, for example, that do have the lawful right to use physical force against another person. A prison guard has the legal permission to strike somebody to keep them in line, as do police officers, as do certain people in certain positions in the military. However, assault can be as minor as spitting on somebody or touching them without permission. Never, ever, under any circumstance, spit on a police officer. That will get you assault of a police officer, and you can serve time for that. Aggravated assault then involves intent to kill or the use of a deadly weapon. So it is assault with, it's often called actually assault with a deadly weapon. That's what that is. And if the victim dies from an aggravated assault, it then becomes murder. Antisocial personality disorder is it's a personality disorder in which one person who is self-centered and uncaring about others, and they are often willing to do anything that will benefit them, even if it involves extreme acts of violence. Antisocial personality disorder can include those with narcissistic personality disorder, or what is often called sociopathy. Sometimes it includes definitions of psychopathy, but we talked about that in lecture 4.1. It should be pointed out that having antisocial personality disorder does not make you a murderer, but it is a risk factor for murder. As with all dynamic and complex human behavior, there are many risk factors involved there. Let's talk about non-predatory versus predatory murder. Non-predatory murder, in this case, the killer views the killing as being reasonable and being a meaningful act. So often the non-predatory murderer did not want to do the thing, hypothetically, but they felt compelled to do the thing. The victim is usually a family member, friend, or acquaintance, which is really disturbing to think about. The perpetrator is often comfortable in the setting, and the non-predatory murder is often not carefully planned. The individual thinks that the values of society support the act, even if that is a delusion, and the killer sees it as being a righteous slaughter or as just a justified act. I guess you could call it mundane non-predatory murder that most Americans would agree with is if you go in somebody else's house, and especially if you threaten that person and then you kill them to defend yourself, that is non-predatory murder by definition. So self-defense, that can be classified as non-predatory murder. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll go to prison for it. That's what has happened there, right? It's a neutral definition. On the other hand, actually, I have some examples of non-predatory murder on my next slide, but I'll finish my thought. On the other hand, there are crimes like honor killings, which are deeply problematic, that occur in some parts of the world where somebody thinks that the behavior of one of their family members is absolutely out of line with the values of society, and as a matter of family honor, they have to kill that member of their family. That is also non-predatory murder, and it's very dynamic, and by our values and morals in our society, we see it as deeply wrong, and it's definitely one of those things that there are kind of lines in the sand that don't include ethnocentrism, so I will go so far to say that is pretty messed up, I guess. As a sociologist, it's kind of weird to define things like that, though. Murdering a lover of a cheating spouse. is sometimes seen as non-predatory murder, whether you think it's right or not. If you find somebody who is actively, if you would say walk in on your spouse while they're having sex with someone else, and then even if you realize it's not actually a rape and you murder that person, that's non-predatory murder. Killing a home invader or trespasser, as I addressed. Delusional parents killing their children. That is non-predatory murder. Sometimes people will go through really severe psychotic breaks where they maybe think their children are demons or something along those lines. So-called honor killings, as I made an allusion to. These are most commonly found in highly patriarchal, highly authoritarian social settings in which the actions of the victim are thought to have brought dishonor to the family, and then the only way for the family to avoid that dishonor is to murder the person. This is not a social structure, luckily, that's present in American society, but you definitely do see this behavior globally. Predatory murders, then, occur when the perpetrator is motivated by the desire to take life. So the killer either doesn't care about community norms, or maybe they are seeking to violate community norms. It really depends on the mindset of the murderer here. The killer may seek to alleviate boredom and to escape existing societal circumstances. At this moment, I'm sitting here, I'm lecturing. I'm pretty sure, by definition, predatory murders are premeditated. I can't think of a circumstance where a predatory murder would not be premeditated, but there probably are variants. Examples of predatory murderers absolutely include serial killers, both process and product killers. We'll see in the next lecture, talk more detail about serial killers. But some serial killers do it because they enjoy the process of killing. And other serial killers do it because they want the body for some reason. I won't go into more graphic detail there. Mass murderers, people who kill a bunch of people all at once, as opposed to a serial killer who kills slowly over a period of time. Those are predatory murderers. Contract killers, those also are predatory murderers. Contract killers, it should be pointed out, there probably aren't nearly as many of them as we perceive them to be. It's an interesting dynamic between media and what actually exists in society. If you've seen Tiger King on Netflix, that's a really good example. The guy that supposedly was hired as a contract killer, that's a really good example of what it actually would look like. I guess I'm not going to give any spoilers there, but if you want to see a good example of what contract killing and what that whole dynamic would look like, I guess check that out. Now let's look at a few patterns in killing. Large cities have significantly higher murder rates than small cities and rural areas. That is a basic criminological principle. It doesn't have to do with the fact that people that live in cities are more morally degenerate or whatever. It really has to do with human social interaction. So think of it this way. Every human being you interact with has a very, very, very small chance that that interaction will lead to violence or maybe even a murder, right? So statistically, if you're in an area where you interact with a lot of people, then statistically you're more likely to get killed, is basically a way to put it. We see here in this chart then, large cities with population of 250,000 or more, there are 10.2 murders per 100,000 people, while cities of small cities or towns, I guess, with populations of fewer than 10,000 have a murder rate of 2.8 per 10,000 per 100,000. So that's a very small murder rate. It should be pointed out, though, that large cities are more likely to have more police, greater investigatory power, and thus it could be more murders are happening in small towns. There just aren't the cops to actually catch people doing the murder. There are significant differences between murder committed by women and those committed by men. This is not necessarily due to biological difference between men and women, but it does have to do with gender dynamics in society. And due to rapidly shifting gender dynamics in our society, data tracking murders we just don't have data regarding non-binary people or anyone that doesn't really clearly fall into male or female categories. Additionally, domestic abuse-related murder in the LGBTQ plus community is also lacking. That probably will change with time, but at the moment, we don't have great data in that regard. Here's a general profile of men who kill, and then we'll look at a profile of women who kill. Men do commit the majority of murders, and again, that's tied in with concepts related to toxic masculinity and hegemonic masculinity and all those other fun gender theory ideas. Men who murder tend to be ages 15 to 19. It should be pointed out that most crimes committed by everyone are committed by people under the age of 30. We humans do have a tendency to age out of our likelihood to commit crime. Men tend to kill other men. I don't know what your conception is, but men tend to kill men. Men commit murders both inside and outside of the house, so anywhere. You contrast that to women. Women tend to kill people inside the house, and that's for a very specific reason. And among people of lower classes, most homicides tend to result from so-called character contests. What that looks like is basically, are you going to let him get away with that? Or is he insulting you in some way? Whatever. That's what that looks like. So it's a matter of challenges to manhood, that sort of thing. Women who kill tend to kill men. They tend to be slightly older on average to men who kill. Women who kill tend to be ages 20 to 24. When a woman kills, it tends to be related to defense in an abusive relationship. So thus, it tends to be in the home, and actually it tends to be in the kitchen. There's a variety of reasons for that. Women who are in abusive relationships might be forced to be in the kitchen more than women who are not. Women who kill their abusers often kill with knives, right? And all of this highlight patriarchal problems that still maintain and continue in our society. So really, the majority of women who kill are women who are in domestic abuse situations. The Netflix series Orange is the New Black, it's fiction. It's dramatized, but it does speak to a certain truth of the women who are in prison are women that have been abused by society and abused by men. So it's really interesting in that regard. Fewer murders occur during fall and spring, and more occur during July and August. That's pretty interesting. However, murders also peak during December. Why? Well, that's when we're interacting with more people. It goes back to the big city thing. It goes back to the more interactions you have, the more likely you are to murder. Additionally, Saturday night is the time when we are more likely to be murdered. Similarly, that's when we're interacting with more people, especially when young people are interacting with more people. In the year 2021, there were over 20,000 gun homicides that occur in the United States. Other industrialized nations such as Canada, England, where guns are harder to get, they have far fewer homicides. Why would that be? Well, a lot of it has to do with the deadliness of the weapons possible, right? Those societies that they don't really have fewer instances of assault, they have fewer instances of assault relating to guns. This does back up an argument that if guns were less available, many heated arguments would result in aggravated assaults as opposed to murder. It's a research note. Due to the highly political nature of the subject, it can be very difficult to find non-biased data in this regard. This data here is pulled from ABC News. It's maybe not necessarily a perfectly unbiased piece of stats, but I put a lot of thought into this, and these are, and I double checked it quite a bit with FBI and all those sources. This is a pretty good and reliable set of data. Other statistics: of all crimes, homicide is least likely to involve strangers. So less than 20% of murders is a stranger killing you. We often think of strangers as being the most dangerous people. Actually, the people you know are the ones most likely to kill you. And 25% of homicides, the victim first attacks their subsequent slayer. So we call this victim precipitated homicide. So that's act of self-defense, basically. So a person is defending themselves, and then the person who is attacked then kills the person. So that's about 25% of homicides are homicides that are done in self-defense. Okay, that is a good starting point for our study of this topic. And be sure to watch the following lectures in the series, and I will talk to you later.